I was inspired by so many of the items in the Amethyst Moon subscription box that I just had to sit down and have a play. Keep watching and I'll show you how I made it. Hey there, Sandy Huntress here for Create Along with another polymer clay tutorial. So of course the first thing you need to do is decide what you're going to make. I'm going to use this little tin. It's a 3¼ inch by 1¼ inch tin. I've got some clay rolled out on a number 2 setting, which is around 2 millimeters thick. And I just cut a circle that just fit inside that rim of the top of the tin. And now I'm adding some liquid clay to the top of the tin. This is less to stick it down, because if you were to bake this tin just like this with this liquid clay, after baking you could pretty much just peel it right off. But the reason I add it is to keep air bubbles from forming under my circle of clay. It just makes it stick better. So I'm smoothing it down and pressing out any air bubbles. A little piece of deli sheet helps you do that without marking it up with fingerprints and such. I'm just kind of chasing those bubbles out. I'll get them better in a minute. Now I'm using some Armor All as a release. I know a lot of folks like water, but I like the fact that I can get a really thin, even layer of Armor All on something, and it's a great release. This is one of the 3 Deco Disc stamps that comes in the Amethyst Moon box. And I'm just pressing that in. These definitely need a release, and you need to press very firmly. I have found the best way to get a good impression with these is to do just what I'm doing here. Press really hard from both directions. Just hold it up in your fingers and press. Now you'll see that a few air bubbles have formed because I've displaced some clay. So I'm just going to use, again, that deli paper and kind of chase those bubbles out to the edge so there are no air bubbles left under the clay. Next, I've got some of the Amethyst Mica pigment powder that came in the subscription box. And we'll use that to just bring out the detail of texture. Now, my first thought was just to dip my finger in the lid. And by the way, I was showing you earlier that the threads are at the top. I can't tell you how many times I've opened these upside down. So annoying. So if you just look at the threads, they are at the top of the container. What I ended up doing here, this color wasn't strong enough to get it from the lid. So I just dip my finger in and then tap off the excess on that piece of paper on the side. That way I don't have little extra bits that fall down into where I don't want them. But I can get a little bit more on there than getting it from the lid. It depends on the color. I'm also getting a little bit around that outer edge. Now these are those gorgeous amethyst cabochons that came in the box. You get 6 in the box, and none of the Deco discs have a design that is divisible by 6. I think this one has 20. That's not helpful. So you just have to eyeball it. And or 16, actually, I think it has. Yeah. Anyways, you just have to eyeball it unless you use a design that has the same number of divisions as you have pieces to add. But I'm not really worried about getting these perfectly placed. You'll see why later. Because of the kind of decoration I'm going to add, it kind of camouflages the fact that they're not perfectly placed. It doesn't really matter. Now these are not something that's going to stick to the clay after baking, but we're going to add some clay. Now here are some colors that I had rolled out, prepared, and I ended up using those 3 on the right, the purples. Those are all a combination of Sculpey Souffle Royalty and different amounts of pearl to make different shades of purple and lavender. And here's another tip. Whenever you grab a piece for something, chances are the first piece you pull out is probably at least 4 times more than you need. And also, an acrylic block is a fantastic way to roll nice, even snakes. And a longer acrylic block is an even better way to roll long, even snakes, or lugs, or ropes. They're not tubes, by the way. I've heard people call them tubes. They're not. Tubes have a hole in the middle. We'll call them cords. So now I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger and just kind of use it to curl that down. You can make just a loop, you can make a spiral, you can spiral it around several times. And this is the part where it's just fun to play. What I'm doing is creating a bezel around these cabochons so that once it's baked, it will hold them in place with a mechanical bond rather than glue or something like that. It will hold them in place so that they won't fall out. I'd much rather have a mechanical way of holding it rather than glue, because glues often fail. Now I chose another one of my kind of pinky colors here. Rolled it out. And if you get little air bubbles, like it starts shredding, just pull those bits off. That means there's an air bubble in there. And you just pull it off and nice and tightly roll it back up into a ball again and try rolling it out again. Now it's at this point, oh yeah, you can use a little ball tool to just kind of neaten up things. It's at this point I decided I really didn't care for that, too much more of that color, and I pulled in one of the purples, the Sulfie Soufflé Royalty mixes. And sorry, the camera shake, I think it's bumping into my camera stand, which is just out of frame at the top of the tile. This is actually a fun project because I did this upstairs in my studio, and I'm doing the voiceover because I just put on headphones and listened to music and just created, and it was a lot of fun rather than having to do a lot of thinking and talking. So now I'm doing the talking and just kind of letting you know what's going on. Sometimes it's fun just to create without really having too much of a plan, and then you get done and you see what you've got. And yes, at this point I was like, yeah, I'm not real thrilled with that pink. So what I have here is another shade of the purple. It's just slightly different. I think this one I'm using right now is the straight Royalty, and the other one on there is just a tiny bit lighter. So they're two different shades. I think it adds just I think that subtle variation just adds a little bit of richness. And we'll just carry on. Notice the really long piece I rolled. That makes it so much easier for you to kind of plan and design and make smooth curves. If you just have that little bit of extra to hold on to as you're coiling. And then once you're done, you can use a craft knife or you can just use your thumbnail. I do both. And cut that off. Cut it off at an angle and then pull out that end and just kind of gently pinch it with your fingers to give that end a nice tapered finish. So I'm just going to alternate around the box. 3 of them will get the Royalty and 3 of them will get the slightly lighter version of Royalty. And you just design and have fun. But those loops that I put up there, they're pretty and decorative, but they also serve the purpose of once that clay is baked, they will hold that cabochon in place and it won't be able to move and fall out on you. Because otherwise, it may stick to the clay now, but it won't after it's baked. Just making that. So there, I'm all done, and I'm going to add a little bit more embellishment. These little 2mm rhinestones that came in the Amethyst Moon box. These are Hot Fix crystals. They are, this particular one I got, now you might have gotten a different one, but this one that I got was Crystal AB, which is Aurora Borealis, which is just that kind of rainbow finish when it sparkles. And I thought they were just really, really pretty with this purple. And this pickup tool is fantastic. I know there are like expensive ones, the Crystal Katana. I haven't yet invested in one, but I really like just this simple pencil. I think they come in a box of 10 for just a few dollars. And I'm just using the back of the pencil to kind of press them in place. Now these hot fix crystals, you can tell if your crystals are hot fix if you look at the back and they have like a little grid pattern on the back. That is glue that is on there. I mean, these can be applied to fabrics like clothing, bedazzling your clothes or anything fabric. And what's used then is a tool with a metal tip that gets hot, and you place it on the crystal, and then that heats the crystal, which melts the glue. But for using these on polymer clay, all you need to do is bake it. So you put them on unbaked clay, and then when you bake it, the glue melts and adheres them to the clay. And I'm just trying to find a little tool here that I can use to press those in. You don't have to press them in firmly. I just want to make sure I have contact with the clay so that they'll be stuck after baking. And I'm just kind of scattering these around. I don't have a pattern because, of course, my other decorations aren't following in a pattern. It's kind of whimsical and as I feel like it, sprinkling like stars in the sky. So once that's all done, I have baked it. And while I was baking, I played with the moon and star mold that came in the Create Along box, and I really liked that moon. I thought they were both super cute, but didn't love that pinky color, and so I'm going to mold another one out of some of the purplish color. And a couple tips for using these molds. First of all, shape your clay so that it's a similar shape and size to what you're trying to mold. Be careful when you're trimming these. You can cut them really easily. And then you just press it in, put it on a firm surface like a tile and press it in. And then, see what I'm doing with my finger there? I'm just kind of pulling that away from the edge. And that means when you demold it, you won't have any little fuzzy bits. And you won't have to do any cleaning up. And I think that just goes perfectly in the center there. That wasn't part of my original plan, but that's okay. And if there's an area of your center that you like less, you can cover it up. So here I've got some pearl pigment powder. And again, I thought I was going to use the lid, and again, it didn't work. So just using it straight from the container. For this, it's fine. I just wanted to give it a little bit of shine. Now, you need to add some liquid clay, and I added a fair amount to the back of this because if you look at that area that I'm going to add it, it's got a lot of raised texture, so there are going to be a lot of points contacting the rest of the center. So I put a fairly thick layer of liquid clay on there, and then popped it in place. Isn't that cute? You could put the star in there too, it's up to you. Then we're going to decorate the bottom. Now, it's because this tin is gold that I decided to decorate it. If it was silver, I might have just left it. So I have a sheet of clay, or a strip of clay, that I rolled out on a number 4 on my pasta machine, which is about 1.5 millimeters thick. And I love these quilting rollers. Just adding a little liquid clay, so no air bubbles. So I'm going to measure that as about 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to cut a strip about 3/4 of an inch. These quilting rulers, mine used to have more black lines. I think the polymer clay has eaten away at it, but I don't care. It makes it so easy to cut nice even strips. Then I'll just add that to the base of my tin, smoothing it on as I go, trying not to trap air bubbles. And having that edge up against that edge on the tin. And then where it meets, you just trim it away and smooth that seam however you like. And now I'm going to clean that up a little bit. And yeah, use a bit of paper to smooth it, whatever you need to do to get that smooth. And I'm going to add some texture with a comb. I love this texture. I wanted just something very simple. I thought about leaving it plain, but I decided to add just a very simple texture. I'm not trying to make these even all around, just kind of adding lines all around, but not perfectly even. I think it's a nice contrast to all the organic stuff going up on the lid. And then a few bits going cross-hatch, and if it lifts up, you probably pressed too hard. And isn't that cool? And now, this is a little tricky to trim this neatly, because that clay that you pressed out of the way with the comb has to go somewhere, so it kind of climbs up. And to trim this out, what I suggest is you take your clay blade and kind of put it in there and flick it up so that you're pulling those little bits out. You can also use your blade to kind of straighten that edge as you go along. You know, I tried like doing it with a craft knife and then going back, and it was just a pain. This was the easiest way I found to just make that edge neat. So this little edge of gold is going to show in the finished box, and I don't mind that. If you do mind, you may want to paint it. I mean, you could just paint the whole thing. You'd need a paint from metal that would stick, because acrylic paint, I don't know that it would stick very well over the long term. So you just get that all cleaned up and tidy. And then you can kind of gently rub your finger along that edge just to smooth out any raggedness left from trimming. And then this part is always fun, is trimming the bottom. Whenever you have a flat thing to trim against, it's very satisfying because you can just get it perfect. You just lay your blade against the bottom and trim, and there you go. And I'm going to add a few more crystals. Now, I didn't think of this until I was done, but wouldn't it be fun to add these like in the shapes of constellations? That would be kind of cool. I just added a few. I didn't go crazy. I didn't want too many. Just added a few in random sprinklings. So there's the bottom with all of its rhinestones and texture. And I also did the same thing to the side of the lid. And these both need to be baked now. While they're baking, I'm going to prepare a rope border to go around the upper edge of the tin. And my ruler, I didn't have an acrylic block long enough, but my ruler worked really well to roll out an even rope that's long. You'll need around 12 inches, and you just roll out two. And I smush one down to my tile and start twisting. The tricky part with this is getting it even. Usually there'll be a part towards the ends that is a little tighter. So you can kind of go in and just do a few with your hands in spots that aren't as tight. And then stick it down to the tile and let it rest, because it'll want to untwist on you. And then once it's baked, the last thing to do is to add the rope border. So I'm just checking here, make sure I have enough. Yep. And then again, a little liquid clay. Just to make sure that it's stuck in place. Now, if I had this to do over, I would probably make that rope border just a little bit thinner. It looks just a tiny bit chunky to me, but it's fine. I actually finished it overnight, didn't bake it, got up in the morning and thought about taking it off and rebaking it and decided it was good enough. But, you know, if you hate it, then absolutely go for it and take it off and redo it so that you'll be happier with it in the end. So just wrapping this around, and again, a little bit of that gold will show. So if you have a color that you don't want to show at all, you'll need to paint it or do something else to cover that. I didn't mind a little bit of the gold showing. Now you trim this to make it meet seamlessly. You just trim right along one of those diagonals. And then on the other piece, trim it one longer than you think you'll need. And then you can just tuck it in there and kind of tuck in that cut end, just kind of pushing it down with my fingernail, and it's seamless. And then you bake it one last time, and you're all done. I love creating with this Create Along subscription boxes because they're themed. All the items just go together so well. So thanks so much for watching. Happy creating. Bye-bye.